Well, hey, welcome back to my channel. So glad you're here. In this video, I'm gonna be talking about the 100 most popular romances of the last 3 years, according to Goodreads. So I was perusing Goodreads, as one does, and by one, I mean me. I was perusing Goodreads, and I came across a list that said something to the effect of the 100 most popular romances of the past 3 years, according to Goodreads readers. And I was intrigued instantly. Clicked, looked at the list, and realized, wow, I've read 75 of the 100 books. Wouldn't it be a brilliant idea if I read the last 25 that I hadn't already read and did a bit of a review and a reflection on that list? Yeah, it would be pretty cool. So that's what I'm doing here today. I kind of racked my brain, I won't lie, on how I wanted to execute this video. These video types are not unique here on my channel. I have been doing videos like this for a while, but I knew it would be kind of hard to pull off talking about all 100 romances. So instead, I endeavored to tell you about the 5-star romances from this list, the books that I think are totally worth your time, and the books that I think you need to pick up. I'm also going to tell you some honorable mentions, books that I thought were worthy of a read, but didn't quite crack the 5-star reading. Additionally, if you would like to see me tier rank all 100 of these books, you can go over to my Patreon on any tier, and that video is available there as we speak. But let's get into what we're all here for. Me letting you know which of these 100 books are worth your time. There's 12, by the way. 12 that are definitely worth your time, so let's just get into it, shall we? First up, we have People We Meet on Vacation by the always lovely Emily Henry. I think always lovely actually might be incorrect, seeing as this is the only book that I've ever enjoyed by her. This book is about Poppy and Alex. It is a friends to lovers romance. They have been friends for a while. They meet in college, a la Sally and Harry, right? They strike up a friendship and they decide that they are going to go on a vacation every year after graduating from university. Poppy is a travel writer. She basically gets to go on these free vacations, and she takes Alex with her on the summer vacations that she goes on because he's a teacher and he can only go in the summers, right? And this is kind of where they connect, strengthen their friendship, etc. They text throughout the year as well, obviously, but this is their thing, except for things kind of got fucked up a while ago. A couple summers ago, things kind of went off the rails, and we don't know what happens as an audience, as readers. Poppy is hitting up Alex because she misses him, and she's like, hey, I know it's been a couple summers, but I feel like we should put all that stuff aside and go on one last trip. And he's like, okay, fine, sounds good. And on this trip, we get to find out kind of what happened a few summers ago, and we also get to see these two bone down, of course. I love this book. This is the only Emily Henry book that I find to be a true romance. Both characters undergo a lot of character growth and development, which is something that I feel like is pretty typical of her books, but instead of focusing a lot on like grief or family relationships, this book really is about the central relationship, Poppy and Alex, and I love that. I also love friends to lovers because they've got this sort of like baked in chemistry already. You're not having to build it from scratch. Here's hoping that she can do something equally as good in the future. I think 2 of her other books are on this list, and they didn't crack my 5-star rating, nor did they make it on the honorable mentions list. So moving on to another book that I think actually is probably pretty divisive, because I know that not everybody loves Tessa Bailey, but It Happened One Summer is a 5-star fucking read for me. It just is, okay? I can't help it if I want a man to spend money on me. That's just who I am as a person. So this story is about Piper and Brendan. Piper is, I think, modeled off of Lexis from Schitt's Creek, and she makes a series of fuck-ups at the beginning of the book and loses access to her trust fund. She's kind of cut off, for lack of a better word, by her stepdad, and she is sent to a fishing town up north, not in California. I believe it's in Washington or Oregon or something like that. She is going to live in her biological father's hometown. She is going to fix up the bar that she was left by him, and she is going to develop and become a better person, and she does throughout the course of the story, while also falling in love with a grumpy crab fisherman, Brendan. And it is quite a delight. I think this book stands apart from some of Tessa's other books in that it is deeply sexy and very raunchy horny, but it also has a lot of good character development on the parts of both Piper and Brendan. I liked this book. I thought it was romantic. I thought it was sexy. I thought it was sweet. And I feel like these two were puzzle pieces that were always meant to be together, which to me is the hallmark of a good romance. So I think if you haven't picked this one up, you should give it a try, especially since if you do not like this book, I don't think you're going to like any other books by this author. So I think it's a good way to dip your toes into the Tessa waters and then perhaps retreat them little piggies if this wasn't your cup of tea. Moving on, Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I believe 2 of her 3 novels were on this list. I picked Love on the Brain because I am nothing if not a pen pal loving bitch, okay? It is an underutilized device in romance that I think should be utilized more often. So this book's about Bea and Levi. They both are going to be working at NASA, and they both have worked together in the past. I think maybe in university or something like that, and it's very clear that Levi just doesn't really like Bea. Bea feels uncomfortable in this situation when she finds out she's gonna have to be working with him again at NASA. She's like, fuck, really didn't want to have to turn down my dream job, and I'm not going to, but I'm also gonna have to deal with this piece of shit. Not an ideal situation. And unfortunately, things get a little tricky for her because it feels like Levi is trying to sabotage the work that she's trying to do there, which I believe is to create some sort of like good brain helmet for astronauts or some shit. I don't know science. I'm here talking about romance. Does it look like I know science? That being said, it's a misunderstanding clearly. Bea and Levi clearly bi, definitely have an attraction for each other that they sort of work out through the course of the story. And also, something I really love is that they both have sciencey Twitter handles, and they are anonymous on these Twitter handles, but they've been DMing each other for years, and they're friends, and they have this internet friendship, but they don't know who the other person is in real life, and I love that. I only really like a secret or hidden identity when it is used to get two characters to know each other in a different context without preconceived notions of each other. So like this is a perfect execution of that. I don't want someone to like lie about who they are in person, like face to face to someone. I think that's a little fucked up. This story is so good. It's so fun. I feel like, again, if you don't like this book, you're probably not gonna like other books from this author. She writes in a very fanficky way, and if you don't fuck with that, you're not gonna fuck with this book, frankly. But sometimes I just want goofy. I want silly. I want to kick my little toes. Toes are coming up a lot in this video, but this was really great. And I think if you're someone in a STEM field, you would perhaps like this if you can, again, overlook the tropey kind of silliness of it all. Carrying on, I suppose, with the STEM theme, we have the Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Again, I think they have multiple books on this list, but this is the only one by them that I have really enjoyed in recent years. Also, the second book in this series I also enjoyed, but the Soulmate Equation is about single mom and statistician Jess. That word always fucks me up. Statistician. Jess is not really looking for love, but her friend urges her to sign up for this new dating app where you basically like send in some of your spit, and they use the biological markers in your DNA to try to find you a proven match. That's basically what the like idea of the app is. I think it's called like genetically or genetic ally, I don't know. Something to that effect. I didn't read the audiobooks, I don't know how they're actually pronouncing that, but Jess ends up pairing or matching like very high, like I think they call them like diamond matches, like a 99% match with the founder of the app, River, and she doesn't really believe in the technology and she's not really excited about this, but it's a really good look if the founder can find a match on the app, so they kind of fake date and it turns into real feelings and real love, and I liked it. Was it the most deeply romantic? No. Was it the most original? Yeah, I would say it was pretty original. That probably wasn't a good example. Was this unforgettable? No, probably not. Christina Lauren, as an author writing duo, they don't write the most unforgettable magical romances ever, but they do write things that are well plotted, well paced, and will get the job done. And sometimes I just want to get the job done. 5 stars, loved it, very fun, would recommend if you're just looking for something quick and easy, okay? Something that's a lot less quick and easy, but is a book that I feel like deserves all the fucking hype and doesn't get nearly enough, is 7 Days in June by T.L. Williams. I think this book is magical, and I think a lot of people might not know that this is a romance based on the cover. If you really look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, I get that that's a romance, but when I first looked at it, I was kind of confused, right? Like, it doesn't look like a cartoon cover, it's not like a typical couple cover, I just didn't know what to expect. When I picked this book up, though, I was so thoroughly impressed. It was one of my favorite books the year that I read it, which I believe was 2020 or 2021. This book's about our main character, Ava, who is an erotic fiction author, and she doesn't feel like she's really taken very seriously in her field. She wants to kind of branch out into, I believe, the more literary side of things, and when she's at a writing conference, she ends up meeting up with this man named Shane, who is a kind of darling in the literary world, and they have this like delightful, I don't want to say chance encounter, but they sort of like strike up conversation, and then we find out these two used to have a romantic relationship back in the day. So it is a second chance romance. They used to be together when they were teenagers, and I think that this is one of, again, the most sweepingly, deeply romantic romances I've read ever. I love a good second chance romance. I used to hate them. I used to think, why does anyone deserve a second chance? But this was more of a case of right person, wrong time, and I so enjoyed this one. I'm also very excited for this author's next book, which I believe comes out in 2024, and again, I think this is maybe the most underhyped book on this entire list. You gotta pick it up. There's something on this list for everyone, and for the Disney adults, I have Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. This is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and in my opinion, this is the most grounded and well-rounded of the books. You do have a sprinkling of the Disney, but it's not overwhelming, right? So the premise of the series is that there's these 3 billionaire brothers who are like descendants of Walt Disney, Dreamland. We're not trying to go down the IP copyright claims hole, right? But basically 3 kids of a grandpa who founded a basically Disney type company, and he's like, hey, I'm dead. If you would like to be a CEO or a CFO or like be in any way a part of this company, you have to fulfill my demands. You know, why is it always that old people leave demands behind in their will? Anyway, for this guy, for Declan in specific, I believe he is the oldest of the guys. He is in charge of, I'm not sure what, but he is a grumpy billionaire. He ends up needing to be married. That's like his terms and conditions, shall we say. He ends up falling for our girl Iris, who is such a delight. She is his assistant. She does not want to marry this man, but she cannot find anyone who is willing to marry him because he's such a piece of shit. At the beginning of the story, that is. They fall in love, and it is a delight. It is a delight. I think this book took me by surprise after reading the first book in the series, The Fine Print. So many people liked that book. Didn't understand the hype personally because I felt like the heroine was a little bit too Disney adult, you know, for lack of a better way hate to say it, she was a little too quirky. But the heroine in this one is not. She definitely has a lightness and a brightness about her, and there is that backdrop again of like the Disney-ish setting, but it doesn't feel over the top. You know, you're not like bombarded constantly. And I also think this one has better pacing than the last book in the series. So overall, I think you should pick it up. I think everybody should give it a try. Even if you're not a Disney adult, I do think that you would enjoy this one. All right, next up we have a double feature. We have 2 books by the same author. And I hesitated putting 2 books by the same author on my like top list or whatever, but when I decided that the criteria was going to be 5 stars, both of these books got 5 stars, and I think that both of them being so different, in my opinion, from each other goes to show how talented this author is, how incredible at her craft this author is. We're just gonna talk about both of them, you know, because I think you need to read both. First up, we have Take Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book is fabulous, and I feel like the heroine in this book is unlike any of the other heroines on this list. So if you're someone who is a bit of a grumpy bitch like myself, you're gonna enjoy this one, okay? So Danny is a professor at a university, and she's not really looking for love. I think she just got out of a long-term relationship actually, because the person that she was with said, hey, you're kind of a non-feeling cold bitch, and I just don't think this is gonna work. We don't have the same priorities. I'm out. Danny obviously feels impacted by this. She's not the cold bitch that her partner said she was. She's kind of like, okay, well, if I can't be a good partner in a relationship and I'm too busy with my job, I'll just leave it there, okay? Like, I don't need to be with anyone. Until Zaf fireman carries her out of a building during a routine fire drill. People snap a couple pictures, and their picture winds up all over social media. They get a lot of buzz, a lot of attention, and Zaf is in charge of a sports charity. He's the founder of the sports charity for children that really gets them the mental health care that they need through sports. Obviously a very admirable cause, and so he wants to capitalize on this post. He asks Danny if she will fake date him so that he can, again, get like the money he needs for this charity, and she of course like can't say no to him, and so they fake date. Fake dating, real feelings, all of that jazz. It was really delightful. There were so many things in this book to love. It felt real, first of all. Like, sure, the social media thing, it feels a little over the top and silly, but when you stop and really hang out with the characters for a second, you realize these feel like real people. Danny is one of those characters who is definitely prickly. Like, she definitely has a hard exterior, and I feel like that's something that like Emily Henry tries to do often with her characters, but I feel like Talia Hibbert really nails it. Like, you can be prickly and you can be very job focused and you can be maybe not outwardly emotional, but still have emotions, right? And I think Danny is a perfect representation of that. And then you have Zaf, who is dealing with anxiety and depression, and I love to see that, especially in men in books, men who go to therapy and men who get help for their troubles. I think this book is deeply romantic, it's deeply sexy, and it's also really fucking real. And just hats off to Talia Hibbert. I'm so excited to read the book she's coming out with next year, and I'm excited to talk about the next book that she's written, the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, Actor Age Eve Brown. Actor Age Eve Brown is about an entirely different Brown sister with an entirely different personality, Eve. She is the flaky, flighty little sister of the older 2 Brown sisters in the first 2 books, and she is kind of like Piper in It Happened One Summer, cut off from her trust, and so she needs to nail down a full-time position and keep it for a few months so she can prove to her family that she needs access to her trust, right? She's not like this flaky, flighty person. She can find a job that she actually likes and enjoys and can stick with. And she actually gets her job through sort of a chance encounter, and she ends up working for a guy named Jacob who owns an inn, and she is going to be the chef at this inn. Actually, I think it's a bed and breakfast. Semantics. Eve and Jacob couldn't be more different in personality. Eve is super sunshiny and scatterbrained, and Jacob is a little bit more austere. He is also autistic. I loved this book for its representation, but also just the relationship between Eve and Jacob. Again, I don't know how Talia Hibbert does it, but she is capable of writing a book that is so sweet and so fun and also so sexy. I just don't get it. It like sneaks up on you over time, and you're like, oh shit, I'm actually very excited for these people to have sex, and oh shit, the sex is really good. She nails it every time. I don't think I've read a Talia Hibbert book that I was like, meh, this is fine. She does such a great job, and I've also seen the evolution of her writing too. I've read some of her older stuff, I've read some of her newer stuff, and it just has me more excited to read more books from her in the future. And if you haven't picked up the series, get a life. Get a clue. Pick up these books. All the links are in the description, okay? Like, there's no excuse. Pick this one up. Switching gears again to a book that's maybe a little bit more serious. A book that could definitely get you in your feels and could perhaps get you to cry like it did for me. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I think there are other Abby Jimenez books on this list as well. This is one of 2 that I have enjoyed by her. Her first series was kind of a fail for me. I actually kind of hated all of those books, but Part of Your World really woke me up and showed me that she is a fantastic romance author. This book is about Alexis and Daniel. Alexis, at the beginning of the book, is is going to therapy, and through therapy, she realizes that the man she's married to has been emotionally abusing her their entire relationship. So she decides to seek a divorce, and this is challenging because her parents don't understand why she would leave a successful man like this. She just feels unsupported by the people around her, right? Also unsupported because her parents are trying to push her to, I guess, try to get a promotion at work. She is an ER doctor, but she's perfectly happy just being an ER doctor. She doesn't want to be like in charge of shit, right? She's not having the best time, and she ends up breaking down in her car. Not like emotionally breaking down, but her car has troubles in a small town, and she ends up meeting a man named Daniel, who is just the epitome of golden retriever, just the nicest guy ever. And he's going through some shit of his own as well. But they have this instant chemistry, and despite the kind of age gap that they have, she's older than him, they try to make this work. They try to kind of maintain contact even though they don't live in the same town, and it is so incredible on so many levels. I feel like this book is such a healthy example of moving on from a shit relationship and finding a really good one. I also appreciate the nuance that is shown here too. I've definitely read books where there is domestic abuse or partner abuse, but I have never read a book that has this much nuance when it comes to that subject, and you can definitely understand how insidious this could be and how you could just like wake up one day and realize that this has been happening to you. Made me really feel for Alexis and understand how hard it could be to get away from that sort of situation. I also just felt for her so much with her relationship with her parents, which wasn't a huge part of the beginning of the book. She starts to realize how cycles of abuse can happen near the end of the book, and I'm not making this sound really romantic and special and like a book you should pick up, I feel like, but romance is nuanced, and romance can have harder hitting topics in it, and it's not just all about the fucking, okay? This book is really special. I think that if you want to see romance and love triumph over some really fucking hard things in someone's life, I think you will really enjoy this book. It's not easy to read, and I, again, wanted to be very transparent about the fact that there is abuse on page. You can see basically flashbacks of our heroine being emotionally abused by her partner or ex-partner, but to see her find someone who treats her like a fucking queen, it's really inspiring, it's hopeful, it is sweet, and it is very well written. Also, the second book in this series is also really fantastic. I don't believe it's on this list, but Part of Your World is really great, and I think this is one that a lot of people have picked up on my recommendation because I gushed about it when it came out. But if you, for some reason, are living under a rock or you don't subscribe to me, please pick this book up. Next up is a book that I haven't read in a while. I had to kind of jog my memory on why this was a 5-star read, and as I was reading the description and like little lights were going off in my head as I was reminiscing, I was like, this book was so fucking good, and I need to talk about it more often. Spoiler alert by Olivia Dade is a book about Marcus and April. Marcus is a main character in a Game of Thrones type show, but also secretly he writes fan fiction about the show, which I believe are based on books. And then we have April, who also writes fan fiction, and she also cosplays. The cosplay is a bit of a secret, but I think other people in her life know that she writes fan fiction. She ends up going to a convention, I believe, and people kind of put her on blast. She is plus size, and people say that the character she's cosplaying as is not plus size, and how dare she show her body out in public, things like that. Horrible things on Twitter. And Marcus comes to her aid and her defense online, and because of this, there's sort of like a publicity stunt date that kind of needs to happen, and the date goes pretty poorly, but she ends up giving him a second chance, and they kind of date. They have a relationship, and it's really fun. Additionally, this is another situation where there's sort of like a pen palsy, secret identity sort of situation going on. Basically, Marcus and April are friends online. They both write fan fiction, obviously for the same show, so they are fan fiction friends, shall we say, and they kind of like gas each other up and things like that, and they know things about each other, and it's just super sweet. I love this story. This is another situation similar to Part of Your World where we have two characters who are going through a lot in their personal life. They find solace in each other, and we also get to see the various reasons why they are the way that they are. I believe Marcus in this story kind of struggles with the fact that he is an actor. He enjoys his job, but his parents don't see it as serious or as something worthy of praise, and so he's constantly looking for validation. And then April, again, she is bullied online and not like necessarily able to be proud of the things that she does and her passions, and getting to see them kind of evolve over the course of the story and support each other, it's fucking fabulous. Olivia Dade also, if you're curious about her as an author, she tends to write characters who are older. She also does a really good job at writing characters, again, who have mental health issues or who are just like going through real life things. So if you're looking for a romance that feels really grounded in reality, despite maybe some of the more like unrealistic things that happen, spoiler alert's really fantastic, and there's a lot of other books that I've read by her that I've just been incredibly impressed by. So highly recommend her as an author, but this book in particular, you should pick it up. All right, next up we have a book that I don't want to say puts Emily Henry to shame, because I love Emily Henry's one book actually, but The Roughest Draft is what I wanted book lovers to be. This book is about Katrina and Nathan, and they are both authors. They are co-authors of a really successful book that did numbers, right? And they've kind of separated, and they're like contracted to write multiple books together after this like banger, you know, that got published, but they're estranged. Something happened. We don't know what it is at the beginning of the book, and they haven't talked in years. but unfortunately this contract is bringing them back together. They have to write another book together. Even though they've grown apart, they gotta get back together. They gotta do it. They go to Florida, hot, sweaty, balmy Florida together to write this story. And it is a story, I believe, about a married couple divorcing, and it is supposed to be like literary, but also like a little bit erotic. And so in telling the story and writing together and like exchanging chapters, they kind of fall in love with each other, and they also sort of mend the rift in their friendship. It is so erotic. It is so sexy without being raunchy, and I like raunchy, okay? I sure do. But sometimes it's nice to read a story where there's effort put into the relationship development, so you actually care when the characters get together, okay? I felt like this book was really fun to read as well from like a literary perspective. I don't like flowery shit, okay? Typically I don't. But this book felt so fun to read because it was about two authors and it was told in a way that felt different than a lot of the other romances that I pick up. So this is definitely a unique one. I don't think this is going to be for everyone, but if you typically read literary fiction and you want to go on a little bit of like a romance excursion, I would recommend this one. It's fun. And then lastly, the one historical romance that I gave 5 stars is Chasing Cassandra by Lisa Kleypas. Lisa Kleypas is one of the, I would say, most beloved historical romance authors. I think if you've clicked on this video, perhaps you don't know a ton about historical romance, which is totally valid, but Lisa Kleypas is up there with the Julia Quinn's, author of Bridgerton, of the world, right? Like she's prolific, she's written really great shit, and Chasing Cassandra is one of my favorite books that I've read by her. I've read almost all of her books, I feel like, at this point. This one's so fun. So it's about our two main characters, Tom and Cassandra. Tom is this like cold, ruthless, exacting businessman, very smart, and he knows exactly what he wants, and that is Cassandra. Cassandra, however, is after love, and she knows that Tom is incapable of giving it to her, so they kind of have this delightful little dance where she's like, if you love me, I will be with you, and he's like, I don't know how to express love, but I'm obsessed with you, and it is a delight. It is a pure delight. It's been quite a while since I've read this one, so I don't remember the finer details. Not that it really super fucking matters, but the entire Ravenel series is super, super fun. I love a good historical romance series, and I've enjoyed all of the books in this particular series. I think this is the second to last book, but I think if you like an opposites attract romance, you like a guy who feels very stoic but is only obsessed with you, I think you might really enjoy this one, and I think that this is a good introduction into Lisa Kleypas's work. I love her as a historical romance author too because I feel like her work is accessible, but it also feels period appropriate as well. She's not trying to like modernize her historical romances, so would give this one a go if you're looking for a good historical romance. I wish there had been more historicals on this list that I've given 5 stars to. Like I really wish that had been the case. Sadly it's not, though there are quite a few in my honorable mentions, so let's get to those, shall we? There's 13 books. I'm not going to give you big rundowns on them because we don't need to. You can look them up for yourself. I will leave links in the description to all these books and to the article if you want to like go and look at these books. But first up we have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I did like this one. It was her first book. Didn't love it quite as much as her second book, but it was still pretty good. You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel is an absolutely insane, weird, unhinged book about two people who I believe are fiancés. They're about to get married and they hate each other, and so they sabotage each other at every turn until they finally communicate and like get back together or whatever. But it's an unhinged time, and I think that if you're looking for something a little non-tradish, pick it up. The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This one is a smut-free romance about a ballerina and her best friend who's in the NFL, and it's a friends to lovers romance. It's so fucking tropey, and I'm not ashamed to say I ate that shit up. Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall is a book about a son of a rock star who's sort of a piece of shit, but he kind of reforms his ways and ends up with kind of a straight-laced attorney type, and it is quite the delight. Then we have All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I don't always have luck with Mariana Zapata's works, but I enjoyed this book. It's about a girl who is trying to like hike in Colorado. She's staying at an Airbnb. She falls for the Airbnb host, who is a bit of an asshole grump, of course. Then we have The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I really enjoyed this book. It's about a lady bodyguard who's protecting a really famous guy who she's always had a crush on. How fun. Then we have The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai. This is one that I believe is quite underrated. It's a book I gave 4 stars, and it is a brother's best friend romance. I like that he grovels. I like that he knows that he fucked up, and I liked how sexy this book was. It was fun. Written in the Stars by Alexandria Belfleur is a female-female romance and or Pride and Prejudice retelling, kind of a Grumpy Sunshine thing. It's fun. It very much reminds me of a movie. Number 9 is The Charm Offensive, which is a male-male romance where we have a guy who's going on a dating show to kind of like show that he's not actually the like tack asshole that he has been portrayed in the media as. So he dates a bunch of women and he realizes he's actually in love with the guy who's the showrunner of the show, and it is so sweet, and I love the declaration of love at the end of the book. A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore is a historical romance that is far too long, but is a friends to lovers story about a suffragette who is just trying to get her shit published in a magazine, and a guy who's trying to foil her plans, but also believes in women's suffrage, which is pretty important. Then we have Reputation by Lex Croucher. This book is a, I want to say like Bridgerton meets Mean Girls kind kind of story that I actually don't remember very much about, despite it being one of my favorite books that I read last year. It's sexy, it's fun, and I feel like it has some good shit to say. Would recommend. A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall is, again, one of the most deeply romantic books on this list. This is a story about a trans woman and her lovely duke she falls for. They used to be best friends until our lovely lady dies in a war and reinvents herself, and so the duke doesn't know who she is, doesn't realize that's his best friend, and they get to meet each other in different circumstances, and they fall in love, and it is a fucking delight. Then we have The Queer Principles of Kit Webb at number 13. This was a male-male romance set in the old historical times, and we have a guy who hits up another guy, and he's like, yo, I know you're a thief, I know you've been a thief in the past, and I would like you to be a thief in the future and steal some shit from my dad. Help me steal some shit from my dad. And he's like, you know what? Not normally into dudes, but you're a really pretty one, and I want to help you. And then they fall in love. It's a delight from start to finish. I would recommend it. So those are the, 25 books that I recommend reading from this list of 100 books. There are obviously so many more books on this list that are good and bad and terrible, but I hope that in giving you some recommendations, you have some new things to read from this list, things that you maybe have never heard of, but definitely deserve the hype and definitely deserve a read. I will leave a link in the description to all 25 books that I recommend, so you can go check them out for yourself. I will also, again, leave a link to my Patreon if you want to see me tier rank all 100 of these books. But thanks so much for watching. Had a great time filming this. Love y'all so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.